Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to this session of today. Today, we're going to have a new innovation practice group, mainly focusing on critical infrastructure. I'm Sylvia from Climate Kick. I'm here to host this event with a few colleagues that are going to present themselves during the session. And before starting, I would like to give you some instruction about how the session of today is going to work. Today, we're going to ask you to use quite a lot the chat here in Zoom. So please make sure that you will have the opportunity to type in the Zoom chat. And we're going to try to have an interactive session, always staying here in the plenary room. The agenda of today looks like this. So we're going to start with a quick welcome, and we're going to introduce you what Innovation Practice Group are, and we're going to have an interactive check-in using the chat. Then we're going to have a quick introduction of the topic of today, so on critical infrastructure, and we're going to deep dive a little bit on what does it mean for us critical infrastructure and on what aspect we're going to focus today. And then we're going to have three speakers that are here with us today that are going to present you, and are going also to interact a little bit with you through a few different tools. At the end of each presentation, you will have the opportunity to start to ask your question. So please feel free to use like the Zoom technicalities. If you go on the bottom bar, there's React. You have the possibility to raise your hands, as I'm doing now, for example, if you have any question. Or if you would like just to turn on the mic as well, or during the presentation, if there's anything that is coming up to your mind, just feel free to type your question in the chat. We're going to have the Q&A at the end of each presentation. And then before closing the session, we're going to have a final reflection wrap up of the overall 2 hours of today. We're going to ask you to fill in a quick evaluation survey at the end, just to understand if this different format compared to previous innovation practice groups, for those of you that already participated in some, if you appreciated this different format. And then we're going to have a closure giving you a bit of instruction of what's next. So let's start with the innovation practice group. So what are innovation practice group? When we talk about innovation practice group, we're referring to part of a program which is sitting inside the Pathway to Resilience. Pathway to Resilience is an European program where we are working at the moment with 39 European regions to support them in writing their own climate adaptation strategies and investment plan. And the Innovation Practice Group are part of it, but are also open to externals like practitioners that would like to join those learning and knowledge sharing groups. The idea is to have like conversation guided by regional challenges and needs. And those conversations are driven like by 4 main pillars. The first one is to use this space to showcase best practices. So to highlight successful existing solutions that are present in your region or something that you're working on. The second one is to develop plans and ideas. So to try to co-create different plans and ideas starting from the knowledge that everybody is bringing into the room. The third point is to share expertise. So to have some exchange of knowledge on enabling condition and system. And the fourth and last one is to broaden the perspective and gain a wider view of what are regional challenges. The Innovation Practice Group have 3 main objectives. One is to connect the regions with the sources of knowledge and expertise. So to have like some kind of exchange and collection of all the different tools and resources that could be useful on the specific topic of the Innovation Practice Group. The second one is to connect the regions with the regions. So to co-create and to create this kind of community of innovative adaptation practitioners all across Europe. And the last but not least is to provide additional opportunities to exchange knowledge and to have like interaction. The Innovation Practice Group for Critical Infrastructure is not really starting today. So today is the first session of a series of sessions we're going to have along the year. We're going to have a second IPGs week in June and the third one in September. And the idea is also to kind of continue this with a new cohort of regions that are going to join us later next year. But what we're going to present today here is something that came from a previous experience that we had in October 24 with the 39 regions that are now working with us, where we have collected with all of them during the kickoff meeting of Positive Resilience, what are the challenges and needs that they identify at the regional level. And starting from those challenges and needs, we have built the content of all the different sessions coming in, different speakers and practitioners to share with all of us their experience so far. Having said that, I would like to quickly present you what is going to be the place where we're going to collect all the different resources that are going to be shared along the way. So at the end of the session, not now, we're going to share with you a Miro board. In the Miro board, you will have the opportunity to find all the materials that is going to be shared during today's session. The Miro board is going to be available for you. So just make sure at the end of the session where we're going to share the link to save it on your laptop. On the top bar of the Miro board, you will find the IPGs weeks calendar when you can register to all the different sessions. In the central part, you will find the content of the session itself. So in this case, it's going to be the presentation from the speakers, and we're going to try to ask also all your questions in that. And the last part, which is probably the most important part, is this wall of resources, where you can find all the resources that could be interesting on the related topic. And this is also the place where you can share the resources that you think may be relevant for other practitioners that are joining those innovation practice group. At the end of the session where we're going to share the link, I'm also going to guide you through Miro, and I'm going to show you how it works, so you have a bit more of understanding of how to navigate through that. And having said that, I think we can move to the first interactive part of today's session, which is our check-in. With that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen to hopefully see some face. And I will also like to invite those of you that can to please share, to please turn on the camera, just to speak to some faces and not just to some white names with the back screen. Thanks a lot for Stefan and Saidet and Mike and Jan, all of you for turning on the camera. And I will invite you to open the chat. And in the chat, you will see one question that is going to come up. And I'm going to ask you to please let us know what is your role and how does it connect to infrastructure resilience. So what is your role and how does it connect to infrastructure resilience? Please, everybody type in the chat so we can have a sense of who is in the room. You can also put the name of your organization or of your regions so we can start to familiarize all together. And while we're doing that, I'm going to put some background music as well. Thank you, everybody. I see that there's still a few things coming up in the chat. Thanks, everybody, for sharing. And I think that we can now move to the second part. And I'm going to share again my screen. And I'm happy to pass the floor to Beatrice, who is going to be leading us today through all the different presentations. Beatrice, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for being here today in this workshop. I hope it's going to be as interactive as possible. I'm Beatrice. I work at Global Infrastructure Basel Foundation, which is a foundation based in Switzerland, which is now working with Bloomberg on developing the Fast Infra label. The Fast Infra label is a label that aims at certifying the sustainability and resilience performance of infrastructure projects. So I'm based in Singapore, and previously I have studied here. I obtained my PhD in resilience assessment and infrastructure modeling. So I hope this session today is going to be productive. So to start with, please see that, yeah. So I just wanted to put what we are talking about today in context. So I could see from your answer on the chat that when we think about resilience, we all think about physical risk. And in fact, this is what we are going to talk about in today's session. But just to mention that actually, when we talk about resilience and risk, we might want to talk about also transition risk, which is the risk that infrastructure face when transitioning to a low carbon or net zero economy. And these are typically market and technology risk. So for example, a fossil fuel power plant might face the risk of becoming obsolete in a net zero economy. Reputational risk, meaning that also customer might prefer to switch to a clean electricity supply, and policy and legal. For example, some countries at a certain point might want to phase out fossil fuel. And then we have man-made risk, which is everything which is not included under the physical and the transition risk. So this includes technological hazard, accident, which could be either human errors or like on purpose accident, and then cyber, including, for example, cyber attack. And then we have on the horizontal axis here, we have two levels, idiosyncratic, meaning specific to an infrastructure project, and systemic, meaning we look not only at a single infrastructure in a single geographical point, but we look at a network. So we could look, for example, at the entire power grid, or not only power grid interconnected with other dependent infrastructures, such as roads and water. So this is extremely relevant and something that I think one of the speakers will talk about. Because, for example, during the Texas winter storm, we saw how there were widespread power outages due to the power grid not functioning properly. And because of that, water pumps also became unavailable, and therefore the pressure in the water distribution system was not enough, and therefore houses did not receive water. So there is a number of interconnected effects, and these ripple effects exacerbate the effect or the impacts of physical risk. So it is also important to start thinking in a systemic way about risk. And then in my next slide, I wanted to talk about the definition of resilience and adaptation. So it was very interesting to read what we have posted in the chat. Here, I want to use the definition by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, which defined resilience as prevention, absorption, recovery, adaptation, and transformation of infrastructure structures and function which have been exposed to current and potential future hazard. Where potential current or potential future hazard correspond to the physical transition and human-made risk, which I just discussed in the previous slide. And then adaptation is defined as the set of processes, practices, and structures to moderate damages or to benefit from opportunities associated with climate change. And again, in this session, we are just focusing on the part about moderating damages. We are not focusing on benefiting from opportunities related to climate change. This is something related to transition, risk, and opportunities. So in my example before, I talked about a fossil fuel power plant. If we talk about a solar power plant or a wind power plant, they may face opportunity in a net zero economy. But this is not the topic of today. But I wanted to give these two definition, also to explain that these words are not fuzzy words. I don't want them to be fuzzy words, right? Prevent, absorb, recover, resilience, adaptation. So in order to explain how I think about them, I took the concrete example of a power grid. So over the life cycle of a transmission line as part of the power grid, we may want to do a number of to implement a number of adaptation measures in order to make it more resilient. So throughout its life, this may include, for example, taking preventative measures, for example, vegetation management. It might include reinforcing the pole in order to increase the absorptive ability of the transmission system. If something happens, for example, if a tree falls on the power lines, then we might want to prepare for it, and we might want to increase the ability of the infrastructure to quickly recover. So for example, if repair crews are available, then the system or the management of the power grid will be able to quickly dispatch them in order to repair the power grid and bring it up to full functionality again. And then there is the fourth dimension, which is transformation, which is the one that I like the most, which is the ability of an infrastructure to learn from past disruption and improve over time. So in this case, an example might be to transfer the power lines from overground to underground. And this is something that actually we see happening. So after Hurricane Sandy, for example, the New York and New Jersey power grid was so disrupted that a number of improvement and transformation action have been put in place, so that after Hurricane Sandy, we saw that actually the number of even the small power outages that happen during normal operating condition were decreased. This is because the power grid was in fact transformed after learning from the disaster. So unfortunately here there is no cost dimension, although I know it's a very important dimension to resilience. So there are a number of topics that we talk about when we talk about resilience: the risk of maladaptation, the cost, and Arya, the third presenter today, will touch a little bit upon them during his presentation. So with my next slide, please, I'd like to stop here talking. And we have three speakers. So I'd like to leave the floor to Miljenko. But first, I'd like to provide a brief introduction. So Miljenko is the head of the climate department at the Northwest Croatia Regional Energy and Climate Agency. He holds a degree in natural science from the Faculty of Science at the University of Zagreb. The focus of his work is to support cities and regions on their path to energy transition and climate change resilience. He's deeply involved in that process from strategic levels to the project development and implementation. He's also a member of several national and European level working groups that focus on climate change. So I think we could not have a better speaker to start the session. Miljenko, please.
Thanks. Thank you, Beatrice. So I think Sylvia will share my presentation. So thank you for the nice introduction, and thanks also very much pleasure to be here today with you guys, because during the chat I also seen that there's a lot of people who is dealing with the same problems we do. So I'm gonna try to give you a glimpse of what we are doing here, and just also to start is that we are not focusing only on critical infrastructure, but we are focusing with our climate proofing exercise on all infrastructure types, so which we are working on here in Croatia. So next slide, please. You can see, and you probably witnessed these things also in your countries and places where you're coming from, these are some typical pictures of Croatia in in the past few years. On the left-hand upper side, you can see this is a power plant, solar power plant that was destroyed maybe a month and a half ago, in a place that, if you ask me, where it should never have been installed, because that's an area that has recently been, it's always been known for the high winds, but it has been recently actually prone to some extreme winds. And what we know for sure, that no climate proofing exercise was performed for this site, and we had severe winds on this place, and this power plant was heavily damaged in this event. And on the right hand side, you can see this is a public garage in one of the Croatian cities, and this is the second day after it was opened. What happened on that very day was that we had a huge rainfall in short period of time. It's along the Adriatic coast, actually, and it was not the single one-off event. It happens every time when we have this type of event. So obviously also it wasn't climate proofed in the sense when it was designed. On the bottom side, you can see basically two pictures that are from the same event. It was now almost 2 years ago. It was in July 23. We had a huge severe weather event in Croatia. It was a huge cyclone coming from Italy and passing through Croatia. And on the left side, you can see one of the very typical examples of how city of Zagreb looked on that day. So number of infrastructure was damaged. So this was one roof that was just blown away, and there was many of the roofs that were damaged. Not only roofs, but a lot of critical infrastructure, but also residential infrastructure. And it was also an occasion when one human life was lost. And on the right-hand side, you can see one family house in the eastern part of Croatia that was damaged during that day, and you can see it was damaged from the hail. So basically, an entire village was destroyed on that day, and it looked like that house down there. It had caused severe damage to housing, but also to agriculture sector, because that part of Croatia is very strong in agriculture. So this is just to paint you a picture of how and what we are facing on in Croatia now, and what we'll be seeing in the next year. So next slide, please. That's just another more supporting evidences. So you can see on the left side, typically Croatia is very prone to heat waves, and our summers are red in terms of how they look on the maps, how much we are heating on every summer, and how much damage does drought cause here. So only, for example, in 2020. In 22, we had the damage of 800 million euros due to drought in Croatia. And on the right side, you can see a street. Actually, this is a street. This is not a river. A street that was basically transformed into a river in the city of Rijeka, where we had almost 300 liters of rain in a single day, something that we have seen basically in a couple of weeks ago in Valencia, and we've seen that in Madrid basically this week already. So this is the challenges we are facing. And next slide, please. I have one more challenge to, not a challenge, but actually this is something that is a new normal. This is a thermal image of the city of Zagreb, and you can see that um, we have a huge combination of a heat that is coming and is caused by the climate change, and the other one is caused by the rate of urbanization. And we have, for example, in the city of Zagreb, we have an 88% higher thermal pressure in the period of 1991 to 2020 than it was in the previous time frame of 1961 to 1991. So that's an extreme heat pressure in the city of Zagreb, and as a cause of that, basically we have now officially reclassified the climate classes of the city of Zagreb, and although being inland, so it's inland in Croatia, and it used to have a moderate climate. Now it has a Mediterranean type of climate, which it's obviously a type of climate that Mediterranean cities have and not the continental city. Next slide, please. So probably most of you know what is climate proofing, but I'm going to just repeat if somebody doesn't know. So this is basically a process that should contribute to the resilience of the infrastructure on climate change effects, and it addresses both the mitigation and adaptation activities in the development of the infrastructure projects. And I would repeat here and emphasize here that we are not focusing only on critical infrastructure, but we are working with the cities and regions a lot. So we are focusing on all types of infrastructure that are in place, from buildings to other types of infrastructure that you wouldn't normally call critical infrastructure. So, but yet we are facing some problems here in Croatia, and this is the thing is that it is not yet mandatory in Croatia. So it was only introduced through the calls that were coming and financing projects from a cohesion funding 1.5, maybe 2 years ago from now on, and that's something that we are recently dealing with here. And there are a lot of challenges we are facing. So, but what has happened now is that we have a new climate law in Croatia that is actually making climate proofing mandatory for all infrastructure projects that are, their lifespan is longer than 5 years. Next slide, please. So just a bit of an overview of cost versus benefit. I know it's going to be later on spoken about that, but this is just to give you a bigger picture on that. And what we always try to talk to the developers of infrastructure and also people who are dealing with infrastructure is that, cost of climate proofing is still considered to be relatively low, especially in terms of benefits, and benefits are being avoided costs in case climate proofing was not done, so avoided damage or that kind of a type of cost. So, and the costs of that in later stages of project is quite more expensive, significantly more expensive, and technically, which is even more of a problem, I would say, technically often impossible or not feasible. So that's why I say that the timing of the climate proofing exercise is very crucial. It should be done at the stages of the early project development to be able to address it in the main design. So you can see basically on this graph how much this is a cumulative finance needs on global level compared to the 1.5 degrees scenario. So what is the total climate finance need, and for 2025 to 2100, and what are the avoided losses if we invest that much, and what are the basically the losses if we continue business as usual, so if we do not climate proof our infrastructure. So you can see the difference is really huge. Next slide, please. So what is the background? Background is a bit what I already spoke about, is that, majority of infrastructure that we are developing it has a long lifespan, and it's not that you're building something to be here for a couple of years, but we are building the infrastructure to stay here for a longer time. And if we now go and build the infrastructure without, I would say, properly climate proof it, we are locking that infrastructure in to the conditions that are now, or we are not preparing it to be resilient in the future. That's one thing. And we all know that the economy should be carbon net zero by 2050. We'll see how that go, but this is something that we should be thinking about also when designing and developing the infrastructure. And nevertheless, we all know that the climate is changing, and even if we now stop with all the CO2 emissions, we'll still have a good couple of decades of the I would say the harsh environment that we are currently living in. So the infrastructure should be ready for that. Next slide, please. So this is just a bit to show you. So there are basically two pillars. One pillar is climate neutrality, and the other is climate resilience. Climate neutrality, obviously dealing with the greenhouse gas emissions in the project development, and the climate resilience is dealing with the basically with the resilience. And both pillars have two stages, have the screening phase and then detailed analysis. And the screening phase, when it comes to climate resilience, basically deal with initial assessment of risks for particular location where the infrastructure is being built. And I'm going to tell you now that we have done almost 100 climate proofing exercises for 100 different projects, and not in a single one we have remained in the phase one. So we have always had at least one risk that was in red that asked us to go to the second phase, where we have been detailing analyzing the risks and connecting it with the project designs. Next slide, please. So basically, this is positioning of the climate proofing according to the technical guidance of the Commission, which I slightly disagree with, because it positions the climate proofing exercise in the design phase when you're working on your main and final design, and when you're working the permitting process for the environmental impact assessment studies. We have moved this process a bit on the left side, so we are setting the stones for the climate proofing already in the feasibility. So when we are just starting to think about the infrastructure project that we are developing, but even prior than that, we are setting stones for that in the in the strategic parts of the development of projects. So when we talk about the spatial plans, when we talk about pre-feasibility studies, initial business models, and when it comes to, for example, EU funding, then we position that into the operational programs already. Because if you start to talk about climate proofing only in the main design phase of the project, it might be too late, because if you identify that some risks are very high, then you have to, redo your designs to be able to address them in the design. So this is why it's crucial to do this exercise as soon as possible. Next slide, please. This is just one example I would like to show you. It's a reconstruction of an old mill. And the new feature of that building is going to be a library. It is going to be a multicultural center in the city center of Zagreb. And this is the basically the first exercise of climate proofing that we did for this big building. And we did it according to the methodology we have developed, but also it is in line with what a European Investment Bank has developed as a guidance, and we were working closely with them because they're co-financing this project as well. But the crucial thing here is this is the first time that we were asked to calculate the expenditure of the so how much does it cost to make the building climate proofed. So, and what we came up to, because the entire investment, so entire capex is around 90 million euros, and we have basically calculated the 2.7% of total investments is related solely to the climate proofing, so the adaptation to resilience. Next slide, please. Just one thing I have to mention about this: the main risks that that this building is facing is something that I already basically kind of touched upon on the first two slides. Is that Zagreb is positioned in a way that it suffers from significant strong weather events in terms of large hail and significant hurricane types of winds already, and due to the structure of the soil and due to the positioning of the city in the underneath the one of the mountains, we have huge problem with urban flooding. So those were the three main challenges and three main risks that we had to address in the design of the building, and that's basically where I would say almost 3 million euros, which doesn't seem to be high, is will be spent. It's currently being spent because it's being built now to make the building resilient to those risks. How we do that, so we're still on this slide, sorry. How we do that is that what we did is that we needed a strong political push for that, is that even though the climate proofing exercise was not mandatory in Croatia, we have agreed with the mayor of the city of Zagreb to have climate proofing mandatory for all the infrastructure projects prior to having a legal obligation to do so. So now, basically, whatever is being built in Zagreb is climate-proofed. So from, I would say, critical infrastructure to other types of infrastructure that are not considered as a critical infrastructure. And we have developed something that we call a Green Deal guidance, where we have this climate-proofing embedded into the process of designing of infrastructure, which is crucial because in that way we have been able to break the silos that could have happened, that somebody else should be responsible for climate proofing of the infrastructure, but not the designers. So we connected the people who are working on climate proofing exercise with the people who are working on the designs, and that is crucial when it comes to the development of infrastructure. And on this slide, you can see basically something that probably a lot of you guys are working on is also procurement processes and how to basically connect the climate proofing exercise with the public procurement. What we did is that, for example, we are already in the stage one when we are procuring the technical documentation, so development of the technical documentation. We are already attaching the climate proofing initial climate risk assessment to the developers for them to be able to see what do they have to address in the main design. And then when the stage of the main design, we work together with the developers to consolidate the technical documentation for climate proofing. So we then ensure that all the risks that we have addressed for the location are also addressed in the main designs properly. And we develop the monitoring plans for the phases of construction, but also later for the phases of usage of infrastructure. And then in stage 3, basically, when we are procuring the construction works, everybody is from scratch acquainted with the monitoring plan I mentioned. So this is something that is very well taken care of, and very well, I would say, we have very well integrated that into the process of entire project development. So on the basically down there, you can see who are the people who always need to be engaged in this process, to be basically assured that everything is done according to the rules, and if you want to have the infrastructure climate proofed. So next slide, please. As I already mentioned, our experience is that the climate proofing was only lately introduced as a standard. Nationally, it is going to be introduced as mandatory basically from Q2 or Q3 this year. In the more developed parts of Croatia, like for example, the capital of the city of Zagreb, we have already introduced that, and that was basically based on the strong political motivation of the mayor to do so. And what we primarily tackled was the building sector. So, but now we are working and also going to the sector of critical infrastructure and all other types of infrastructures. And what we see is the key challenges is that the data availability. So we have to do a lot of background analysis task and everything to have good analysis of the risks for each and every location we do. We had issues with, with developers in terms of architects and designers and civil engineers and everybody who was in the process, because we had to use a lot of time to explain to them that, this is not an exercise that is only done by people who understand climate risks, but also by, everybody who has to address those risks in the designs. And maybe the biggest setback and concern is the standards and norms that designers are using. They are outdated, so they do not reflect the current conditions that the climate change has caused. So they are designing according to the 100-year norms that do not exist anymore. They are much harsher now, and this is something that we are trying to work with the chambers of architects and designers in Croatia and civil engineers to upgrade those standards and norms. Next slide. I think so. What we're going to do as in the next steps of our work in our methodology is that we will be working heavily on a refinement, and I would say the understanding of the total costs of the resilience of infrastructure, and work also further on a systemic approach, so to mainstream the climate proofing exercise into the governance processes, because this is something that we have seen is crucial, because if we do make it a separate, I would say a separate pillar, then we are going to have a silo of climate proofing, which is not good. And we still have to do a lot of things on awareness raising, capacity building, and push for the standards and norms upgrade, which I already seen. And I know it's not only a typical Croatian thing, it's also a EU level problem, and the standards and norms need to be upgraded, and that needs to happen very soon. So next slide, please. I think it's going to be my last. Yes, so here are my contacts. That's for the end, and I'm here actually now to discuss with you guys and answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Miljenko. I was just about to type a question in the chat. Perhaps I can start with my question, and then please, if anybody has specific question, please go ahead. Maybe I can start with mine.
Sure.
So you talked about the life cycle of an infrastructure project from development to construction to operation. So I was wondering, like, how ready are the different stakeholders which are involved in the different phases to tackle the climate proofing issue?
Well, since we started basically with the exercise 2 years ago, things have developed and changed for better. But the process is not yet, I would say, on the level it should be. And we are going to be facing some significant challenges in the future because we do not have capacity here in Croatia to do that. And I can see in the chat that, for example, in Czech Republic, they also had climate proofing done only for the grand calls, and this is the case also in Croatia. So. And now basically we have a huge gap in terms of also how the process will be handled from the national level in terms of who can do that, the accreditations and everything. So it's going to be a quite difficult process because not everybody is ready, not everybody in the position that should be ready for that is ready here. So it's kind of a still Wild West, if you ask me. And I know we're trying to work bottom up to also help the national levels to do more systemic approach, but it's going to be very crucial to do a lot of capacity building on this issue and a lot of understandings on different level, because this is something that we it has to be done anyway. So I hope this answers.
Yeah, I see there are other three questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Sylvia, let me know. I know we are running a little bit behind time. Maybe we can take another one or two.
Yeah, I think we have time for one or two questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So perhaps, Stefan Vizina is asking, is there a quality control of climate proofing assessment?
Yes. It is. We have an intermediate body in Croatia that is basically certificating the projects that are being, but it's still that is the problem. It's only for the grants. So when you have grants, they have this quality control, and CFCA is the body that is doing this quality control. But honestly, on the level of Croatia, only 1 or 2 people is working on that, and that's not sufficient enough. So quality control should be established, because we have seen different work on that on the climate proofing exercise, and some of that work was really rather not on the quality level that it should be. So what I know is that we are going towards the process to have this entire process certified, like for example you have for the ISO standards or something like that. So there will be a certification body in Croatia that will be certifying legal subjects to be able to perform this task. But if honestly, we are already late with that. We should have been there, a couple of years ago now, but better late than never. So the quality control exists, but it's not on the level it should be.
Thanks. Yeah, actually, let me invite Chen Cheng to ask the next question. I think perhaps rather than me reading from the chat, might be more useful.
Thanks. Thanks. So congratulations, first of all, Mijenko, for the amazing work you've done. I am particularly impressed by one slide when you said you managed to convince the mayor himself to embed all the climate proofing process in the planning and design stage of infrastructure. So how did you manage that work, and especially these kind of political willingness is a key to enable many follow-up actions?
Honestly, there was a bit of luck there because the mayor of the city of Zagreb is, when it comes to his political party, his left Green Party. So we basically, as an agency which is founded by the city of Zagreb, are now using this opportunity to go with whatever we think is needed in terms of climate, energy efficiency, environment, and he's able to understand. That's one thing what we're saying to him, and he did ask for, detailed analysis. What does it mean? It's going to be costlier, and he was able to understand what it means, and he was, keen to even wait for some projects to be, redesigned to address this issue as well. So as I say, we have a bit of luck on that, but now what happened now is that we have like 5 big cities in Croatia. They have some kind of a coalition in Croatia of big cities, and they're sharing now best practices. So this is going to be shared also to other cities. So what we have in Croatia is actually cities and regions being front runners in this issue over the national level. So this is it. So yeah, I think it answers your question, and we hope to see more cities and more mayors to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would invite Alice Johnson if you want to ask your question directly.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, I was just wondering, you obviously highlighted public procurement as one kind of tool that local government has to influence infrastructure development. I was just wondering if you knew of any other tools for local government.
Yeah, spatial planning is one of the crucial tools I see, because for example, we have been redesigning the main spatial plan for the city of Zagreb lately, and we have introduced and analyzed basically the entire city when it comes to climate risks. So we had a lot of data on that, and it's easier now when you have data on specific parts of the city to go with the climate proofing exercise, because you already have a lot of data in place to do so. So spatial planning is something that is one of the, if not even more crucial than public procurement, because if you go and do and envisage something through spatial plans, and later on you basically see that it's kind of a conflicting with the main climate risks, then you're in problem also with the project development. So this is, and usually spatial plans are being changed not that often, maybe every 5 years or so. And if you make a mistake in a spatial plan, then you are getting your building permits according to the spatial plans. So this is, I would say, one of the other crucial things here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have one more question, but please don't stop writing your question on the chat. If there is no time to address it, we will get back to you offline. So can I invite Aldona to ask her question?
I can see her question, so I can.
Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, who initiated?
Yeah.
So I can ask.
Okay.
Who initiated your activities? Did you as scientists propose actions to the mayor, or was the initiative on the part of the city government which invited you to cooperate?
No, it was our initiative. So we are basically the expert agency that was founded by the city, and we are always kind of here to innovate and to suggest new things. So it was our suggestion, and it was our development. So, but we did this suggestion very early in the stage of what we've been developing, and we pitched it to the mayor quite early. So it was, but later on, it mixed with the city government processes, because it does tackle a lot of processes in the city, because it's very horizontal issue as such. So we did initiate it, but later on it was basically a cooperation with the city.
Okay, thank you very much, Mirzenko, for sharing your view and insights on the topic. So next, I will invite Srijit Balakrishnan to share his view on the topic. So Srijit Balakrishnan is an assistant professor in the transport and logistics section at the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management at TU Delft. He holds a PhD in transportation engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. His research focuses on developing models and frameworks to assess the risk and resilience of interdependent infrastructure systems. Before joining TU Delft, Srijit was a researcher at the Singapore ETH Center, working on the simulation and analysis of infrastructure networks. He has also worked at the University of Oxford and on several government-funded projects in infrastructure resilience. So I'll pass it to you, Srijit. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me? Am I audible? Oh, thanks a lot, Beatrice, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining today. So Miljenga already talked about the implementation issues as far as adaptation measures are concerned. I'll be touching upon a slightly different topic, and that's how we can select the most cost-effective adaptation alternative for infrastructure systems or built environment in general. So the topic for today's discussion is cost-benefit analysis of adaptation measures. And just a second. And I'll be discussing about the various challenges that decision makers or even researchers often face when in the question of how we select adaptation measures. I'll be also briefly touching upon two popular frameworks which decision makers often use to pick the right or the most effective adaptation measure. And these are cost-benefit analysis. We already have seen a snapshot of a cost-benefit analysis done in SECRIP in the previous presentation. And then we will also discuss about multi-criteria decision analysis, which is also a more broader decision analysis framework, which is often used for resolving goals with conflicting objectives, as in the case of climate adaptation measure selection. And you all know, like infrastructure systems, such as water networks, power networks, transportation system, they are quite vital to not only the population, but also the economy. Many of these infrastructure systems directly contribute to the economy of a region or a country, but also like they support the vital economic functions in different regions, which ultimately contribute to the GDP of the country, of different countries. But the problem is that recently there is increasing evidence that climate is changing, and it has a detrimental effect on our infrastructure systems because of more intense, more frequent climate events. Like our infrastructure systems are getting disrupted more frequently. And because of that, there is a lot of emphasis on improving resilience of our infrastructure systems. And one of the ways by which we can improve resilience is through adopting climate adaptation measures. And climate adaptation measures can not only reduce existing, ongoing, or future risks, but also can play a role in improving the resilience of our infrastructure systems. And of course, risk reduction and resilience enhancement are slightly different concepts. And I'm happy to have a discussion on it if there is any specific question on it. But we all know climate adaptation measures can reduce risk, but it's always a challenge which is the best climate adaptation measure due to a number of challenges, such as budget constraints, regulatory and policy barriers, socioeconomic and technical impacts, and so on. I want to, so in the previous slide, I already mentioned that the primary purpose of climate adaptation measures is to reduce risk as well as improve resilience. And we already have, so how is actually risk reduction and climate adaptation measures related? So IPCC, which is otherwise called the International Panel of Climate Change, which is a very influential body that sets research and policy directions globally. They have already come up with a framework which is called the SREX framework, where they have established that link between climate adaptation and risk reduction. So as you see in this infographics, which is part of that IPCC report, like climate adaptation measures can have a role on reducing disaster risk reduction. And for that, we need to know what exactly is disaster risk and what are their components. So many of you might already know risk is a combination of 3 components: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And hazards are essentially weather and climate events such as earthquakes or floods, etc., and their likelihood. And exposure is defined as the assets or any other assets or populations which can incur loss due to the occurrence of an extreme event. And the last one is vulnerability, which is a set of characteristics of these exposed assets or living objects, which can result in a higher loss. I can give a brief example for these 3 components. As far as weather and climate events are concerned, earthquake and its likely can be one of the examples. And as far as exposure is concerned, we can take the example of road infrastructure. And then what are the vulnerability characteristics of road infrastructure, which would lead to a higher damage in the event of an earthquake? It can be age of the road, design standards, construction quality, frequency of maintenance, etc., which would decide how much a road infrastructure would be damaged in the case of a earthquake of magnitude 5 or 6. And the framework also has a few feedback loops, which essentially indicate that adaptation is not really like a one-time investment. It's essentially an ongoing process. It's an iterative process. So every adaptation measures on the built environment or on the infrastructure will have certain impacts in terms of risk reduction, but it can also lead to additional vulnerabilities from other hazards or the same hazard. So it's very important for us to always consider this feedback loop and then evaluate the effectiveness of our adaptation measures and tweak these measures to make sure that we are always prepared for additional risks that may originate from our actions. Now the question is, now we have an idea of what are the risks and how adaptation measures can have a role on reducing these risks. Now the question will be, what are the adaptation alternatives we have on our table? And Beatrice in her presentation has briefly mentioned about 4 different types of adaptation of interventions that can lead to adaptation. But in the literature, there is also other classification where we can categorize all the available adaptation measures for infrastructure systems under 4 different categories. And these are robustness, redundancy, resourcefulness, and rapidity. Robustness and resourcefulness, they are pre-disaster. They are pre-disaster interventions which could make sure that the infrastructure system is capable of absorbing the shocks from an extreme event. And the other 2 categories, resourcefulness and rapidity related intervention, they actually make the infrastructure capable to recover from a disruption as soon as possible. I can give some examples for each of these 4 categories, so that like you have a better grasp of what are these. As far as robustness is concerned, it's the ability of the system to withstand a given level of shock. And examples for robustness-related interventions for a road infrastructure can be superior design standards. Another intervention can be adequate maintenance. We make sure that the road infrastructure is maintained properly so that they have a certain level of service. We can also do fortification-related interventions to make sure that the road infrastructure is protected from external shocks like floods or earthquakes. So these all enable that road infrastructure to absorb the shock as much as possible. And the second one is redundancy. So redundancy is mostly about it's a characteristic of a infrastructure system to continue operations even if some of the components fail. I can give an example of a road network where there are two parallel roads. So if there is a road, if one of the roads is failed due to some kind of event, and if the other road is functional, we still can reroute the traffic through the other network so that like the overall disruption to that road network system is minimized. So that's what we call it as redundancy. The third one is resourcefulness, and the fourth one is rapidity. So they have to do with your system's capability to restore the components to their normal functionality if they are damaged due to some kind of event. And some of the examples for interventions under these two categories are adequate restoration, ensuring adequate restoration crew and equipment, as well as ensuring periodic training for the crew and decision makers, so that they know like what exactly to do in the event of a disruption. So now that we have seen what are the different kinds of interventions that we can or adaptation measures that we can adopt, the next question is like, how can we pick the right one or pick the right group of interventions for your project or built environment? And the most popular approach for this solving this question is the cost-benefit analysis. It's a very simple method where we just compare the total cost for a particular climate adaptation alternative, and then compare it with the benefits of that intervention. And the cost, most of the time, the cost include the cost for implementing the adaptation measures, which can be further split into the capex or the upfront costs, which are required to implement, construct, or implement that intervention. But it can also include the other operational maintenance costs, which can come under OPEX costs as well. On the other hand, as far as benefit is concerned, we can measure in terms of the reduction in certain kinds of risks. It can include physical risks, economic risks, or other types of socioeconomic risks, as long as we can convert them into monetary terms. So one of the primary requirement for CB cost benefit analysis is that we should be able to convert every cost and every benefit in the analysis into monetary terms. Otherwise, we won't be able to conduct a cost benefit analysis. And of course, like once we have these monetary values for costs and benefits, it's just a matter of comparing them so that we know whether the benefits exceeds the cost. And there are different metrics that we use in cost benefit analysis for making a decision on whether to pick a climate adaptation measure. For example, one of the measures is net benefits, which is essentially benefits minus cost. On the other hand, we also commonly use benefit cost ratios, which is essentially benefits divided by cost, which is a multiplier. And as long as the multiplier, the literature says that if the multiplier, which is the result of which is the ratio of the benefits to cost, is at least 2, then we can pick that. We can select that adaptation measure. So, what does it mean by having a benefit cost ratio of 2? It means that for every €1 investment in an adaptation measure, we have at least €2 in benefits. It can be in terms of risk reduction, physical risk reduction, economic risk reduction, or any other kind of risk that you would like to reduce through that process. So what are the different types of benefits that we could consider in a cost-benefit analysis? So it pertains to all the different impacts that could be reduced through a adaptation measure implementation. And as far as infrastructure disruptions are concerned, we can have different types of consequences on the physical infrastructure as well as other socio-economic systems which are dependent on our infrastructure systems. So of course, physical damage is one of the primary, reduction in physical risk is one of the primary primary benefit that we can quantify. But other than that, we can also quantify some of the systemic risks or indirect risks which can be reduced through improving the resilience of infrastructure system. That include economic impacts such as business disruptions or production loss which can happen due to infrastructure disruptions. Social effects such as inoperability of social infrastructure, which can happen due to non-functioning infrastructure systems, health effects, environmental effects, etc. And we already have scientific methods and models to quantify each of these systemic risks. But then, of course, as far as systemic risks are concerned, we have a lot of uncertainty in the models that we build, which also needs to be considered whenever we do a cost-benefit analysis considering these systemic risks. I can give a very an example of such a model that we have built in the past to quantify the economic and physical risks reduction through achieved through climate adaptation measures in a interdependent water transport power network. So this network, this infrastructure system, interdependent infrastructure system based case study is done in Tennessee in US. So we developed a model to capture the economic and physical impacts of earthquakes on this particular network. And then we were able to understand what are the impacts of or what are the impacts of different climate adaptation measures on reducing the reducing these risks in the whole system. So once we have that, we can actually pick the most cost-effective measure just by comparing the benefits to the costs of these interventions. So that's about cost-benefit analysis, which is a very, very popular tool used because of its easiness. But the only problem is that we need all the benefits and costs to be converted into monetary terms. But then it's a bit of an issue because climate adaptation measure selection is not a very trivial task. Like it involves a lot of stakeholders. It involves a lot of interests. And therefore, it's very important that we actually take into account of all the stakeholders' input before we make a decision. And for that, climate cost-benefit analysis is not really the right approach. In addition, there is another major consideration as far as climate adaptation measures are concerned. Often when we consider climate adaptation measures, we will have to deal with conflicting objectives. So of course, risk reduction is one of the aspects, but then there could be a chance that a measure can contribute a lot to physical risk reduction. At the same time, it can actually worsen the social justice or social equity aspects. So sometimes when these conflicting objectives are there, it's very important that we actually pick a adaptation measures which are acceptable for all the stakeholders, not really just from an economic perspective. And here is we have another approach which can be really handy, and it's the multi-criteria decision analysis, which can essentially overcome all the major demerits of a cost-benefit analysis. And MCDA, a multi-criteria decision analysis method, or MCDA in short, can integrate various assessment criteria, which can be related to financial aspects or non-financial aspects, or whether it can be monetized or non-monetized. All those considerations which are important for the selection of a measure can be integrated in the assessment criteria of MCDA approaches. And one of the other major important thing that we have to I have to mention about MCDA is that MCDA is not really a competitor to CBA or cost benefit analysis. Rather, CBA can be effectively integrated in MCDA approach. It's just that MCDA give a more generic framework where we can consider a lot of other factors which CBA cannot consider. That's the only aspect. And then I will also give a very simple example for MCDA. Of course, there are different methods for implementing multi-criteria decision analysis, but then the overall framework or the overall workflow for each of these methods remains the same. Essentially, a multi-criteria decision analysis have 5 major steps. The first one is, of course, setting a goal. So as a group of decision makers, you need to, we need to set a goal. And in our case, it can be picking the right adaptation measure or something like that. And the second step is to establish the adaptation alternatives. So you need to have a list of adaptation measures which we would like to analyze, which is quite straightforward and can be done. The third step is to select the stakeholders. So we need to, it's not just, we are not looking this problem only from an economic point of view. Now we need to actually incorporate the concerns and the criteria of different stakeholders. So for that, we need to know like who are the stakeholders who are really interested in this climate adaptation selection process. So we select them. The fourth step is to do the climate multi-criteria decision analysis, where we try to elicit the preferences of different stakeholders. So some stakeholders, they may be really interested in the economic aspects, but some stakeholders may be interested in the societal or societal aspects or equity aspects. So so this is a systematic process for every MCDA approach, where we try to elicit the preferences of different stakeholders and then use those preferences to come up with the weights for different criteria. And then we will be able, using the weights and the criteria, we will be able to assign different scores for different alternatives. And these scores are reflective of not only just the economic importance, but also all other criteria that we have already established and embedded in the decision-making process. And based on the scores for aggregate scores for different alternatives, we can pick the one which has the highest score, and the scores indicate how far is the option, considering all the interests and concerns of all the stakeholders. I know it's a bit abstract, but the idea is that we can incorporate multiple considerations or criteria in evaluating different climate adaptation measures. And of course, like I had already mentioned in the previous slide, that MCDA is not really a competitor of cost-benefit analysis. Costs and benefits can be embedded into criteria so that like we can still use the outputs from the cost-benefit analysis and use it and make it a part of the decision-making process. And of course, as I mentioned before, there are many options for MCDA. Some of the options are analytical hierarchical process, Prometheus, Topsys, best worst method. We will see one of the use cases of best worst method in the next presentation. But of course, like we have other options as well. So it's so we have a more generic, more inclusive approach for the selection of climate adaptation measures, considering to cost-benefit analysis. Yeah, I hope that it was not really technical, but I just wanted to give a brief description of two popular tools that we use for climate adaptation measure selection. And what we have seen is that definitely there are climate risks, and we definitely need to improve resilience through adopting effective climate adaptation measures, which is quite crucial for making sure that our infrastructure systems are capable of withstanding impending risks from climate change. And of course, cost benefit analysis is a very popular tool because generally it's a very engineering way of looking at this problem. And everyone likes to think all the benefits and costs from a monetary perspective because we handle money every day in an everyday basis. So it's very easy for us to have a very good intuition about costs and benefits as long as we have some monetary intuition about it. But the problem is that like it has a lot of limitations, especially when it comes to multiple stakeholders, multiple objectives, and sometimes conflicting objectives. CBA doesn't work, and that's why so acknowledging that climate adaptation measure selection is a complex problem. We have the option to go for multi-criteria decision analysis as well, where we no more focus on just the economic aspects of climate adaptation measures, but we would like to consider a wide range of important criteria, which may or may not be possible to monetized, can be integrated or embedded in the decision-making process, which can lead us to more effective, more acceptable climate adaptation measures. That's all. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please let me know. Also, I'm quite curious to know your perception as well, because from the academic perspective, MCDA approach is one of the everyone we consider MCDA approach is one of the very effective tools for also or bridging that gap between academy and people in practice.
Opening my
So,
house, but
so happy to discuss
first
about
all
that.
day the house was
Thank you so
empty
much.
without lights. I think that it's all day.
Thank you, Srijit. Okay, thank you for muting the mic. Okay, thank you very much, Srijit. I very much appreciated this presentation. If anybody has a question, hoping that you're still with us, please put it in the chat. Maybe I can start with a question. In your presentation, Srijit, you mentioned the reduction of systemic risk as one of the benefits of implementing adaptation. How straightforward is to quantify this systemic risk?
I think it's a major challenge. Like we have the tools, but then what we miss is a way to validate these outputs, especially when it comes to events that have happened in the past. So we don't really have a benchmark to validate the results from the output. So we already had discussion with in the previous discussion. This is what I understood. The decision makers really would like to incorporate these systemic risks in the assessment, but then they need to have certain level of reliability for these results that we provide, which is very difficult from a scientific point of view, because there is definitely a lot of uncertainty over things that we haven't seen in the past. So there are tools, but then all the quantitative tools. So when we go for quantitative tools, the problem is that we also need to make a lot of assumptions, because we need a lot of different types of data inputs to make sure that our model is can ensure a level of or acceptable level of accuracy.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if anybody in the audience has some insight on this. I saw this systemic risk being quantified mostly in academia. I know insurers usually focus on idiosyncratic risk for a single asset or a single infrastructure project. So if somebody has opinion on that, feel free to share. Otherwise, we will go to the next presenter.
But if I can only quickly jump in, so I'll be very quick. So this is something, for example, that we will try to do in next stages. So as you mentioned in your presentation, is that this is something that we will be integrating into the CBAs and feasibility studies, and we already are kind of tackling that. But for example, when we come to decision making in the public administration, then it's a bit different than the decision making on the projects when it comes to private investors, as you mentioned, and so on. So because there is a lot of public money being spent, and I think that the decision making process is a bit easier, I would say, in one way, and in the other way, it's not that easy. So it's quite a complicated exercise as well. But what we will struggle is actually, I know that already, is to make it easily understandable to the wider stakeholders who are connected to the system. So it's not going to be easy, but this is something that we are going to be facing in future as well.
Can I ask you a question? Like, generally, what are they not unsure about, like stakeholders?
Well, it's not so much about the uncertainty or not being sure of. That's their ability to understand the entire process is still very low, I would say. So, we are at a stage that people manage to finally understand why we are even doing CBAs and feasibility studies here, and then now we're introducing yet another, maybe not yet another, but another parameter that they will have to embrace and see how that basically fits into the multi-criteria analysis that we are working on. So this is maybe not understanding, not a good word, maybe a additional level of complexity that is being, as they see it, added into the equation. So it's more about understanding and the capacity to even embrace that. So.
Okay. Thank you very much for the exchange and for sharing your opinion. So this allows me to move to the third presenter. We have with us Arya. So Arya is a master's student at TU Delft, working with Srijith. He is specializing in engineering and policy analysis. He has experience as a senior consultant at EY Parthenon, Indonesia, where he contributed to strategic planning, feasibility studies, market screening, and project monitoring across various industries. Additionally, he worked as an assistant advisor at the Executive Office of the President of the Republic of Indonesia, focusing on economic policy and food security. Currently, his research explores methods for measuring climate adaptation efforts in road infrastructure using multi-criteria decision-making frameworks. So thank you, Arya, for being here with us. I need all of the participants to be participating because Arya is going to present you with a survey. And the results of this survey are going to be used in multi-criteria decision analysis in order to understand how different groups think about the drivers of adaptation and resilience. So we already saw the preliminary results, and it was quite interesting to see how different groups of stakeholders, for example, value costs more than risk reduction when deciding on a certain adaptation measure. So please read with us, and I leave the floor to Arya. And I also share on the chat the link to the survey. Thank you, Arya.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for your introductions. Yeah, so my name is Arya. As Beatrice said, now I'm doing my master degree here in the TU Delft, and I would like to use these occasions to share you about my thesis projects and invite you to join our project now, our survey. So you can scan the QR code on the screen or use the bit.ly here. Yeah. So basically the study is about selecting the adaptations measures in the road infrastructures based on multi-criteria decision analysis or MCDA. So this study aims to help decision makers to determine the suitable adaptations measure in road infrastructures. Have you scanned the QR code? Maybe you can type on the chat if you already scan it now. Yeah. Maybe I'm gonna wait for another minute.
Perhaps if you can give
Okay.
us a thumb up, if you
Okay.
otherwise we will be waiting for people to fill in the survey with no reason. So
Yes.
please just give a thumb up if
Yes.
okay,
Thank you,
perfect.
Beatrice.
Okay,
Okay.
so we do have people who scan it, so let's
Yeah.
go.
Yes. Thank you. So this is a bit background of my study. So this study is driven by the fact that climate change intensified the extreme weather event, like you already put it on your chat, and it's accelerating the root deteriorations like rotting, then pothole, and so on. And it's also trigger catastrophic disasters. So therefore, the root infrastructure need to adapt. But how to determine the suitable adaptation measures? So the study assists the decision maker to prioritize the adaptation measures using multi-criteria decision approach. So, yeah. So this is the 4 criteria that are considered in these studies in selecting the adaptation measures. So the first criteria is disaster risk reductions. So whether these measures have the ability to reduce the climate change induced hazard or increase the adaptive capacity. Let me give you an example. One of the measures, let's say the permeable pavement. It can minimize the flood risk because it allows the water to infiltrate into the ground. The second criteria is the unintended effect, or we can call it maladaptations. Maybe you're already familiar with this term. So maladaptations refer to the potential unexpected outcome of these measures that exacerbate the hazard. For example, the same measures, the permeable pavement, maybe it can allow excessive infiltrations that make the soil saturations and no space for the air. It's just make the flood risk become increased and higher. This is the second criteria. And the third criteria is adverse societal impact. So the negative impact of these adaptations measures to the environment, society, and the economy. We use the same example here, the permeable pavement. Maybe with these measures, the pollutant can seep into the water and harm the local with the water supply. And the fourth criteria is the project cost. It covers the expenditure required to plan, design, and construct the adaptation measures. For example, permeable pavement typically have 1.5 until 3 times more expensive than the conventional one. So in this section, in the criteria selection section, I ask you to rate the importance of each criteria, whether 1 is referred to the less important and 9 is the more important for each of these criteria. Okay. Do you have any questions related to this section? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear and straightforward. Yeah. Please just drag the button on the screen on the survey to select whether it's 1 less important, 9 more important, or moderate in between. So the function of this criteria selection is to see the weight, the importance of this criteria that will be included in the scoring system in the MCDA or multi-criteria decision analysis. Okay. If you're already done with this section, I think we can move to the last sections, the scoring sections. I think these sections take a lot of time rather than the previous one, because in these sections, in the scoring system, you will ask to read the criteria for each measures. So in this study, we identified 11 adaptation measures in the road infrastructures, and you are asked to assess whether each measures have the specific score for each criteria. For examples, like one of the adaptation measures is vegetation plan, whether vegetation plan have the high or low effectiveness in the first criteria, which is disaster risk reductions. It's based on your opinion, totally based on your opinions. Based your experience, you can rate it between 1 to 5 for these sections. For example, this vegetation plan, I think it have a high effectiveness because it can reduce the heat, so I give it 4. Or maybe in the second criteria, the maladaptations. I think like, okay, a vegetation plan, I think have a low likelihood for the maladaptations. Yeah, it may arise if the vegetarian absorb too much water, but it's not a significant. So I give it score 2 because low likelihood. Same case with the third criteria, adverse societal impact, whether it's have a high likelihood with 5 or low likelihood. In the sense like, I think it's have a low likelihood. I give it 2 because yeah, it might have a societal impact if the trees grows too big and are uncontrolled that may block the visibility. And the last criteria is the project cost. I put it 3 here in the moderate level because it have a high initial cost for planting and maintenance, but it's a long-term investment. So you can rate based on your judgment for each measures. Yeah, I will take some time for you to fill in the survey for this section.
Thank you, Arya. Perhaps
Yeah,
while the people fill in the survey,
yes.
I wanted to just mention that these 11 adaptation measures that Arya selected for you to evaluate come directly from a very important document which was published last September, which is the resilience taxonomy published by the Climate Bond Initiative. I think it is the first in its kind. That it's a document which for each infrastructure type provides a set or a number of adaptation measures that can be adapted under different hazard scenarios. So I think it's a very useful document to classify what are the possible adaptation measures to implement in different situations. But the problem is that this document lacks some quantitative threshold or criteria to choose between this adaptation measure. This is why this document. So yeah, let me share the document here. It's
I think I've shared the link in the chat, Beatrice, if you can check it. I suppose
Yeah.
this is what you're referring to.
Exactly, yes. And there is also an Excel file that you can download. You need to do a login. But if you go to the Climate Bond Initiative website, you can download an Excel, and there it's very easy to use. You can select for roads, and you will see all the adaptation measures for roads.
Yeah, so basically this is developed by CBI or Climate Bond Initiative. They create kind of taxonomy called Climate Bond Resilience Taxonomy, and they explore a lot of sectors there. And I only choose now for the preliminary study, the road infrastructure as one of the sectors that they assessed. So these 11 measures is driven from the CBRT document. And I also overlay with the literature review because some studies also have identifies measures, climate adaptation measures in the road infrastructures, and it's aligned with the CBRT one. Maybe Sylvia, you can play the back sound to make it more relaxed in this session.
Yeah,
because
the only thing is that if I play, we won't be able to see your screen anymore because I'm sharing, so I cannot share at the same time.
Got it.
So let's keep it this on the screen for a few minutes.
Yeah. So the idea at the end of the day, after this study, we can know the score of each measures based on this criteria that we discussed earlier. So it's already covered the ability of these measures to reduce the disasters or the potential maladaptations, or maybe the adverse impact to the society beyond the disaster risk reductions. Or it's only just make a higher cost or lower cost. So it's already encapsulate all of the considerations that need to be considered for the suitable adaptations measures.
I think let's take 2 more minutes. And okay, some comments in the chat. If you want to speak directly, please feel free. Okay, so I read the comment about sharing the document. I think all the documents will be in the Miro board, which Sylvia will share at the end of this session. So everything will be there.
Yeah.
Including the PowerPoint presentation, the link to the survey, and yeah, and the link. I will put also maybe the link to this resilience taxonomy.
Yeah.
Maybe Arya, like I have a question while we wait. What are the first? So I know that you already obtained quite a number of responses for this survey. So what are the initial insights that you obtained, that you had?
Yeah, thank you, Beatrice. So based on the first cut, the preliminary study of this research, we found a very interesting insights here. So if you see in the chart, like I'm trying to split the respondent based on the 3 categories here: practitioners, academia, and government officials.
Sorry, Arya, you're sharing the screen or?
Yes, can you see it?
I'm not able to see it.
I can see the presentation.
Okay, then it's just me, sorry, apologies.
Okay, no problems. So if you see it now, each of the background have a different refers or different point of view in putting the weight of each criteria. So here we can see government official. They are tend to have a higher score or higher weight to disaster risk reductions or maladaptations. So they put these 2 criteria more important than the other group of respondents. Meanwhile, for the academy or in university, I think they are more forward-looking. So they put at first societal impact to the overall environment, socioeconomy, and so on, with the higher score rather than the industry and the government officials. And lastly, for the industry, yeah, straightforwardly they looking for the cost more important than the other criteria. So they put project cost higher than the other group of respondents. So we can see kind of the different preferences here based on the importance of each criteria. But
Okay.
yeah, this is still moving, the results still moving based on the latest survey, based on the updates on the responses.
Thank you very much, Arya. I think hopefully these results will be published soon. Of course, they're totally anonymous, so we won't be published any names, but I think it's an important advance for multi-criteria decision analysis with application to resilience and adaptation. Okay, so I think I will leave the floor to Sylvia to give us a few last housekeeping and share the last insight. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Beatrice, and thanks, Arya, and thanks to all the speakers as well. So a few quick information and instruction for the next round. Now that we're arriving to an end. So first things is that I'm launching here a poll. So it will be nice if you can fill it in quickly just to give us some feedback. I know that it's a bit long, there's a few questions, but we would really appreciate if you can give us your feedback, mainly because this session compared to previous session has been slightly different. So we have tried to have a bit more interaction here in the main room. We have like different topic coming in. We have like run a different also check-in, trying to understand better like who was in the room. So we'd like to hear from you if you appreciate like this different format. And for those of you that have participated in previous innovation practice group, but also if you have like and then join the session in all cases. Then the second point while you're filling in the form is that we'd like to share with all of you the mirror link that is now going to appear in the chat. And I will try also to guide you through the mirror link, so you will have the opportunity to see how it's going to work and how to navigate through that. So here it is. And I'm quickly going to share my screen to show you what you will be able to find in this mirror board. Let me try to share my screen. Hopefully you can now see it. Right? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, in the upper part, as I mentioned before, you can see the week 1 agenda and week 2. So 2 important information. We're having the last session this afternoon on financial resources. And about the week 2, just save the date. We're going to have the critical infrastructure session happening on the 3rd of June in the morning. We do not have the registration link yet, but we're going to try to update this one here, and we're going to communicate this with you via mail as soon as possible as well. But for now, just save the date. Then on this part of the mirror board, so we have added all your answers from the check-in. So if you want to go back and see like who was in Rome, you can find the information here. And on the bottom part, you can find like a few questions has been raised for our speaker, but also the presentation. So for those that are not familiar with Miro, the way the presentation works is that you can just zoom in. And if you click on the presentation, you can or move the presentation using like those numbers here, or you can simply like download the presentation clicking this one here. So you can download all the presentation on your laptop. And the same for all of those. You can move the presentation or you can download the presentation. And then last but not least, in the wall of resources, you can find all the different resources that have been shared, like, so you can just click on it. And if you click on this button, it's going to drive you through the survey, for example. And the same is for the tools and material that has been shared, like what we were sharing in the chat. If you click on the different numbers, you can move through the document. But if you click on this link here, bringing you to the source, you're going to be redirected automatically to the document. Last but not least, we encourage you also to submit what are any like topic you would like to hear. If you have any, if you are an expert or if you would like to present your case study, you can click on this button here. And this is more like to see like if someone would like to submit a case study for the next round of Innovation Practice Group. And this is how Miro is going to work. It's going to be open for all of you. So just save the link on your laptop. And also thank you for all of you that are filling in the form. I see that we have a nice number. And last but not least, we do have a request. So I saw in the chat that Oliver was mentioning about the new EU law on critical entities resilience that has been published recently. And we were discussing with him about the possibility to host the next session, focusing on that. So not to have specific like expert come into the room, but to have more kind of an open discussion on how at each regional level this is going to be integrated. If there's anything particular regarding this that could be interesting to be shared, we can of course call into the room also experts that can present further like this, but we would like to find a way to discuss and co-create the session with some of you that may be interested in doing that. So the idea is to create a small task force, if we can call it like this, to coordinate with a few of you and with Beatrice on this specific topic and bring the topic into the room on the 3rd of June. So I saw that in the chat there was someone that was also interested in this specific topic. I'm now referring to Stefan, for example. I don't know if he's still in the room, probably not, but we can reach out via email in case. Or also Miljenko mentioned this, but if someone else would like to jump in and to support like the co-creation of the next session focusing on this topic, that will be lovely. So I don't know, Oliver, if you want to add something. I don't know if someone else would like to jump in.
Well, yeah, just reach out and we can talk about it in a task force. Definitely, I'm keen to look into that.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add something? Or would like to jump in? No need to be expert. I think it's just a matter of making sure that the session that we're going to deliver could be interesting for all of you. So just to bring like a different perspective into the room. We're going to follow up via email as well with this request. So if no one is going to jump in now, you're going to receive, like you're going to have the opportunity to jump in a second moment as well. Great. I think that with that, we can close perfectly on time, 12 o'clock. Amazing. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Beatrice. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Arya, Sriti, and also I know that our first speaker, Vijenko, has to leave a bit before, but it was lovely to have you all, and wishing you a nice lunch break.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you so
Sylvia.
much.